I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Miles, the community manager at Manchester Digital. And today we're running a really informative webinar with Sarah, who is coming from Stripe. And we're going to be covering the topic on basically through checkouts and learn what errors 94% of top e-commerce websites made that cost them sales. So today, hopefully, will be really helpful and we'll be sharing expertise. As we look through the common checkout errors, you can ask questions, and so will also be kind of sharing how you can increase your average order value. That'll help you create recurring revenue. So at any moment you want to ask questions about any of these topics, you can pop them in the Q&A, which is at the bottom. And we always like to say as well, just at the start, it can be daunting as a presenter if you feel like you're speaking to no one. So we do encourage everyone to just say hello on the chat, introduce themselves. But please be mindful as well that you need to, there's a little blue toggle button that you need to click to everyone. So yeah, feel free to say hello and introduce yourself. So Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you in a moment. So yeah, like I said, Q&A at the end. It should roughly be around 20 minutes long. And please ask questions throughout, but we'll do a full Q&A at the end. So yeah, I'll hand over to you, Sarah.
Great, thank you so much, Miles. So as Miles mentioned, my name is Sarah. I'm part of the go-to-market team at Stripe for the UK and Ireland. I've been with Stripe for about 3 years, and today I have the pleasure of talking to you a little bit about some work that we've done to, I suppose, study the whole payment space and become thought leaders in that area. We recently carried out what's become actually a yearly piece of research that we partner with a company called Dun & Bradstreet on, and it's entitled The State of European Checkouts. And really the idea is that the report provides the ultimate checkout experience to drive revenue and guides businesses in how to do that. So without further ado, I'll jump into the content. So as I mentioned, we have partnered with Edgar Dun & Company to select and analyse the checkouts of 800 top e-commerce sites across 8 major European markets represented on screen. We've also rated the top over 200 global subscription companies and a panel of 800 consumers to get some really broad insights into the current shopping behaviours and also trends that payment preferences that we're seeing and factors that impact the checkout experience. So to kick off, we found that 91% of European commerce sites had at least 5 basic errors in their checkout flows. They include not offering popular payment methods, not allowing customers to save their payment details for future use, and stating the obvious, that results in money being left on the table. So to try and categorize these, we find that they fit quite neatly into 4 common areas, and that's how I'm going to, I suppose, approach the discussion today. So firstly, checkout conversion strategies, then payment method preferences, mobile optimization, and subscription best practices. During the economic slowdown, businesses have had to work harder to convert interested buyers into paying customers. And I think that's especially true in context of the current cost of living crisis. People are that little bit more hesitant perhaps to go through with an online purchase, even if they have been browsing. So successful conversion really depends on a fast and intuitive checkout experience without any friction that could cause a user to maybe think that little bit too hard and decide perhaps they don't actually need what they've been browsing for. So as part of the study, we've seen that almost half of European customers, 46%, online shopping increased over the past year. Saying that, 62% of customers surveyed said that they would abandon a purchase if it took more than 2 minutes to check out. So I think 2 minutes can sound like a relatively short amount of time, but if you think of that spent trying to key in your card information and have it kind of go around in circles, 2 minutes feels relatively long. And actually at this point, I would really encourage everyone on the call to think about their own experience as a consumer. So to kind of take your business hat off for a moment and think about yourself as a buyer. What is your level of tolerance for a slow checkout, and you know, how would you behave in some of these scenarios? I know for me, if I can't buy in a few clicks, I will just move on. So in terms of what that means for businesses, again, we're finding that more than half of online customers who intended to make a purchase have walked away in the last year. That's why in today's webinar, what we're going to focus on is a number of insights to help you provide a best-in-class checkout experience and to ultimately drive revenue. So, focusing in on checkout conversion strategies. 64% of European checkouts did not allow customers to save their payment details for future use. So this is kind of, I suppose, what you might call low-hanging fruit, especially if you sell the type of product or service or experience people will come for again and again. I think we can all agree that nobody enjoys a slow checkout experience. And, full disclosure, I'm definitely an online shopper. The team who manage the post room at Stripe will vouch for me. But if I have to get up and get off the couch and find my card details, even that extra 15 to 20 seconds of delay can maybe cause me to think about whether or not I need that dress or that handbag or those shoes, or whatever the case may be. And alternatively, if I can check out easily using, a one-click method like Apple Pay or Google Pay, or indeed if I have my my details saved and I'm a logged in customer, I'm more likely to complete that transaction. The majority of businesses also neglected to integrate key revenue generating opportunities into their checkout flows. And for example, we found that 88% of European e-commerce sites did not recommend products at checkout, despite this being a proven way to increase average order size. So I think we've all seen this before, perhaps on, big major Amazon type retail sites where they're very good at suggesting complementary items. And we found, and research proves, that if you do this effectively, it can really increase the basket size on average, as well as, kind of giving you that better bang for buck once you've already gone through the hard work for perhaps advertising, SEO, of getting your customers' eyes on your website in the first place. Additionally, many websites had transactional errors, and this related to card processing. So 29% of businesses let customers attempt to pay with expired card details, delaying the process. So again, thinking back to my own personal experience, if the checkout screen doesn't prompt you to highlight where your mistake is, it can be very frustrating as the customer to go back through every tiny bit of data that you've input and found the mistake. So again, this is friction. Again, this is frustration, and none of these things lead to high conversion. We also found that many websites, apologies. Next, we're going to take a look at payment preferences. So I think the first thing I'll say is that the UK, Ireland, North America, for example, are very, very card focused, and be it debit cards or credit cards, consumers in those markets are quite comfortable with those payment methods. But that's not the case when we look across Europe. So for any businesses hoping to either that already perhaps work in multiple markets or view going into new markets as a method of expansion, we'd really urge you to kind of, I suppose, take off your consumer cap and think about what a person in France might expect, or indeed a person who likes to use Ideal in the Netherlands. So to expand global reach, businesses have to kind of stay on top, and that would be our advice of how customers prefer to pay. You're going to convert more if you give that optionality and let customers do what they're most comfortable with. So whether that's a one-click checkout or a local payment method, or paying in installments even, for example, the use of BNPL services, all of these taken together can have a really positive impact on checkout conversion. So we found that 95% of customers said it was important for a website to provide the most common payment methods in their country, and 86% said they would frequently abandon the cart if their preferred payment method wasn't available. So when we think about that a little bit more, in the real world, that's the equivalent of 86% of customers turning around and walking out of your shop because they can't pay with their preferred method. So if you put your attention to the slide, you can see that Ideal, which is for the Netherlands, and Blix, which is actually something that Stripe took on in the last year, but services are users based in Poland, are incredibly popular, and they stand out as having, you would be leaving a lot of money on the table if you tried to operate in those markets and didn't offer those particular services to consumers. So it does depend very much. Each market has its own peculiarities, but essentially what we're trying to get across here is that if you don't bring that locality to the payments experience, you will alienate a certain cohort of your potential customers. Beyond the payment methods, businesses, especially depending on what exactly it is that you're selling, should also consider letting consumers pay in installments. So obviously, I think intuitively, this makes most sense when we're talking about high value or large average order value type businesses. So BNPLs, some of the most popular ones being things that I'm sure you're again familiar with as consumers, like Klarna, ClearPay, and Affirm, are becoming increasingly popular, and consumers are becoming increasingly au fait with them, comfortable with them, and expectant to see them at checkout. Our research actually found that 68% of European customers saying that they would be more likely to complete a purchase if one of these payment methods was available. Next, let's move on to mobile optimization. So looking, I think nobody needs me to tell you about the proliferation of smartphones and how people are, do so much of their lives on their phone these days. And I think really talking about mobile optimization is, in plain English, talking about meeting your customer where they are. And a key, something that we couldn't possibly ignore is the role of digital wallets. Separately, a Stripe analysis found that 25% of European customers have either Apple Pay or Google Pay enabled on their device, and that creates an opportunity for businesses to offer a one-click checkout experience that's on average at least 3 times faster than manually having to enter your payment information. So again, if we cast our minds back to that scenario where you have to get up off the couch and go find your card and rummage through your purse, this cuts out all of that and delivers a really kind of delightfully smooth payment experience to that customer. I think as well for businesses, it's also worth thinking about the demographics of who your business is, because these statistics are obviously quite generalized. So if you know that your business skews towards a younger consumer, the impact of Google Pay and Apple Pay is actually going to be outsized in comparison even to these statistics. On the flip side, despite the consumer trends, our research actually showed that 89% of checkouts analysed did not support Apple Pay and Google Pay across the European markets. So there's actually a huge disparity between demand and supply. So if you take anything from this webinar, make it be a priority that this one can be like a very quick win for you. And finally, I suppose in a very similar sense, the real trend coming through this year is the rise of the one-click checkout experience. So again, we do see some variance by country. Curiously, the UK is actually least likely here, but you can see it actually incredibly strongly popular in the high 80s across some countries in continental Europe, like Poland, Sweden, Germany, and Spain. And the UK and France lagging slightly, but again, I think perhaps that's relative to the kind of popularity of things like Google Pay and Apple Pay, which are serving a somewhat similar purpose in these markets. So you'll be delighted to know that we're approaching our last topic. So best practices in subscriptions. So I think the pretext to any conversation about subscription is the cost of acquiring a new customer. And I think any business would agree that if you can win a customer and do business with them again and again and again, that's a really ideal scenario to be in. So one trend that we're definitely noticing at Stripe is that even businesses who historically in the past have relied on those single transactions or even single invoices for work done are reclassifying their businesses and creating new products and new revenue streams in this area of subscription. So as you can see on the stats on screen, subscription services have improved checkout experiences, with 75% of European customers previously having had a negative experience with subscriptions. When we look back to that top 217 global subscription sites, 21% had at least 3 basic errors in their transaction process. So while we've definitely seen a huge uptick in subscriptions, there's definitely still room for improvement in this area. So I think when you are talking about subscriptions, what you really want to do is empower your users. So that's, again, thinking of myself as a consumer. I know if a business has a very honky cancellation process, if I can't manage my subscription, maintain my card details, or essentially feel in control that if I want to stop this at any point that I can, I'm less likely and less comfortable to enter into a subscription relationship with that company. So here we see 25% are deterred from subscribing if they can't self-manage their subscriptions online. I know personally that rings true for me. 57% of subscription sites do not offer a free trial to allow users to try before buying, which we really feel is a wasted opportunity, because if you can collect the card information and collect the permission for the subscription to happen at, say, the 7-day point or 14 days, a month, whatever the case may be, after you create it, people are typically quite comfortable, availing, and, they want to try out your service before they're fully committed. But we find that the number of people who actually cancel the subscription before that first payment is relatively small. So this is a real opportunity for businesses to take a win. So I know we've actually run through quite a lot of content in the course of a relatively short period of time, but the good news is we have also created a checkout conversion checklist. So essentially, this is a document that you can take away. You can go onto your own website and simulate that customer experience and find out where those gaps are. I will also say, obviously, I'm here representing Stripe today. So spoiler alert, all of these are things that you can do with Stripe. So the idea obviously is that we're building a kind of a best-in-class checkout experience, but really the takeaway is that we want businesses to be able to meet customers where they are, to meet their expectations, and ultimately have all that hard work of advertising, marketing, social, spending on social media. Once you've put in that hard work to acquire a customer, we want to ensure that the payments pace, that last hurdle, is not where this falls down. So we believe by implementing, ideally all, but even some of these changes would have a net positive impact on the, I suppose, your revenue generation and the consumer's experience. So hopefully this is a useful takeaway for everyone. And that is the end of our presentation today, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was really useful and interesting. So, if anyone has any questions, please pop in the Q&A or in the chat. I found it really interesting that there's such big differences in different countries. Do you see that the UK market will become similar to the European markets, for payment methods, and even the mobile optimization as well, with Apple Pay and Google Pay?
Yeah, so what we're seeing at the moment is that the UK was actually kind of a very strong adopter of Apple Pay and Google Pay, maybe relative to certain European markets. And then it's perhaps other one-click checkout experiences that are taking precedence there. But that said, I think it's very open for what the future of checkouts will look like in 5 years' time from, or even 2 or 3 years' time from now, because we're seeing things like open banking on the horizon. Essentially, we as consumers will get used to different ways of making payments versus today. And I think what we're saying to businesses, like that meet your customer where they are, is so important, because if you don't constantly invest in your checkout, or if you don't partner with someone who will constantly invest in a checkout that they're hosting for you, you face the risk of being left behind. And if we were to think about the example of Ideal in the Netherlands, like there could be a 40-point swing in terms of adoption as to whether you offer that payment method or not, because the expectation is so ubiquitous. So obviously we don't have a single payment method like that in the UK beyond cards, but I think for anyone looking at other markets, it would be kind of foolish to assume that the UK will always exactly remain as it is today.
For sure. And another question's come through. I think you touched on it with open banking, but Are there any emerging trends or technologies that I guess the audience here today could be looking out for or keeping up to date with? That
Yeah, definitely. So I think, yeah, those are probably the two things: one-click checkout and open banking. So, full disclosure, open banking is not something that Stripe is offering as of today, but we are working on it. The reason that we haven't rushed to market is obviously I think the consumer-led demand is what is going to make this successful. So we are not. I suppose our priority is to get the product incredibly good and incredibly robust before we add it to our checkout suite. But it is definitely something that we will see in the future. But the adoption is it's great to have a really fantastically sophisticated technical solution for that. But if customers aren't familiar with the idea of paying with their bank details instead of paying with a card, that's going to be the secret sauce to actually making that successful. And then secondly, in the area of one-click checkouts, so this is an area that Stripe has actually invested hugely in. I'd be really curious if anyone in the call has ever come across something called Stripe Link, or you might even just see Link as the brand name. So this is Stripe's own one-click checkout experience. And the whole idea is that if you as a consumer have ever paid for anything on a Stripe merchant with Link enabled, once you've gone through that initial sign up, it is, and you come across another Link enabled Stripe merchant. So for context, obviously Stripe has millions of customers, but we also have some big platform customers, the likes of, say, Shopify, who then in turn are powering, millions again of small businesses. So the ubiquity of Stripe in the market is actually quite advanced. So essentially, as a consumer, when you come across Link, the first time, obviously you're signing up for the service, but any subsequent time, it will be possible for you to verify and check out in a very safe and compliant manner in as little as 6 to 7 seconds. So that kind of, sitting there on your phone, trying to input your address, hopefully all of that is going to become a thing of the past. I think websites and businesses remembering you, kind of the tokenization of cards across multiple retailers, is firstly going to make online transactions safer, but definitely more comfortable and easy for consumers to complete.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if in the future things like purses and wallets will become redundant. Everything will be done.
It's definitely an interesting thing. I mean, I think there is still a place for that kind of, for cash in our society, and I think that's maybe a bigger question. But again, it's really about giving the customer as much choice as you possibly can. Because if you wed yourself very specifically to one particular type of taking payments, you will alienate somebody. So I think, yeah, very much we're going to be focusing on adding to that list of payment methods that we offer across Europe, adding to I suppose just that ubiquity approach that we have at Stripe. And we are also working on card payments in real life as well. So maybe merchants who are predominantly online but want to either have a flagship or dabble at a trade show and take some online some IRL purchases, we can support those types of use cases as well, in a tech forward way.
Yeah. James asked a question I did wonder as well. And it's around buy now, pay later. So do you have any thoughts on the differences between countries and regions when it comes to buy now, pay later adoption or customer preference? For example, why does the UK lag behind other countries? I think it was Sweden, in my notes, who was kind of really high adopters of.
Yeah, so Sweden is also the birthplace of Klarna. So I think it's no surprise that is the market that is most comfortable. And they probably rolled out most successfully in Northern European markets. So Norway, Finland, Germany, Klarna is a very important payment method, as I mentioned, especially if you are paying for that, a sofa or that kind of bigger ticket item rather than, a £30 top that you will, probably just pay out of pocket. So I think consumers see a lot of value. So Klarna certainly is a BNPL that I would be a little bit familiar with myself. And they are spending and investing a lot in the consumer side of their app and their experience. So using it as a conversion tool, I think, is very important, and it is growing in the UK. Still, the stats year on year are improving. we obviously, I work very closely with Klarna, but we also work with ClearPay, Afterpay, and Firm. Sorry, ClearPay and Afterpay is the same company, just in case anyone's confused. They just trade under different names in different jurisdictions. And they're from Australia originally as well, which is also another BNPL stronghold. So I think there is just kind of a legacy effect when that's the birthplace of that particular technology. I haven't seen a major BNPL on that scale out of the UK just yet, but it is very much a tech hotspot. So hopefully we might see the first big UK BNPL taking hold in the near future.
And interestingly, you talk about kind of legacy. You've obviously got big companies in America as well, who are now offering it. What's the take up in America for buy now, pay later?
Yeah, so the American consumer, again, is a totally different beast, even to I'd say the European consumer, specifically the UK consumer. Obviously, they are strong credit card users. So I think the challenge with BNPL in that market is that a lot of people have great reward schemes with their credit card providers. It's a bit different in Europe. We would probably only really see that with Amex, and that's due to kind of regulatory limits on costs on transactions in the European Economic Area. But I think it is more competitive, certainly for BNPLs in the US, because customers are so wedded to those benefits that they get on their credit cards and those air miles and points and upgrades. So yeah, it's slower. Europe is definitely the BNPL leader, speaking globally. But I think anything is on the table for the future. We've seen so many changes in the last kind of 3 to 5 years in the space of payments, and I would be very surprised if we don't see more changes again in the next couple of years as well.
Brilliant. I think we got time for one more question. So Neve has asked, so if we're going to focus on one area of high performing checkouts, which do you feel is the most important or yields the best results? So I guess it'll be the key take. Like, so if anyone's going to take one thing away from today, what would you recommend it to be?
Yeah, so again, the checklist. So I think it's hard to say without seeing your particular checkout where you're falling down most. So I definitely recommend that. But I mean, sight unseen, knowing nothing, I think mobile optimization is, if you haven't done that, that's a glaring omission. And I think hand in hand, Apple Pay and Google Pay in the UK market are so important. So if you're currently working with a card provider who doesn't offer those services, and as I mentioned, especially if your target demographic is a bit younger, you're definitely leaving money on the table. So I think Apple Pay, Google Pay, and mobile go hand in hand. It was kind of a subset of that. So without knowing anything about your checkout, Eve, that would definitely be my top recommendation. But I'd encourage you to take that checklist, go through it line by line, and even if there's 20 something things listed, if you improve 5, you will see a notable improvement.
Yeah, and yeah, that makes complete sense. And on the topic of the checklist, so we will email all attendees the checklist after the call, including the recording of the presentation. So Sarah, I want to say a big thank you for your time today and running through the presentation. And I hope the people in the audience as well found it really useful. I just want to make note that this has been part of our FinTech Week, which Stripe are our main headline sponsors. And then Stripe, and I believe yourself, Sarah, will be joining us tomorrow in person for our FinTech conference. And there'll be lots of other topics that we'll be covering, including the future of payments, trust and transparency, financial connectivity. So if you haven't already booked onto that, we would strongly recommend you do so. It will start at 1 p.m. at Circle Square in Manchester. And on Friday, we have another webinar with another sponsor, CTI, who will be running through how to design a customer experience that drives customer acquisition. So this is looking at things like pricing, amongst other things, as well on your website. So that starts at 10 a.m. on Friday. So I do hope that people in the audience can attend either of those events. But I wish you a great day and a safe flight to Manchester, Sarah, later on.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in person tomorrow.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much. Goodbye.